The leather-bound book felt heavy in my hands, a physical manifestation of their disappointment. How to Grow Up, the gilded title read, mocking me from its perch on the coffee table. My parents, Sarah and Robert, had presented it to me on my 25th birthday. Not with a smile, but with a sigh. "We just think you need a little direction, Kaylee," my mother, Sarah, had said, her voice dripping with an almost theatrical weariness. She traced the rim of her teacup, not meeting my eyes. My father, Robert, cleared his throat, a sound like gravel shifting. "It's time you stopped living off our generosity. This book, it's a guide. For your own good." I remember the sting, sharper than any slap. 25. I worked. I paid rent for the tiny apartment I shared with 2 roommates. I even contributed to the family's endless emergencies. But in their eyes, I was still the child who needed a manual. The book sat on my nightstand for a week, then moved to a dusty corner of my bookshelf, its spine uncracked. A monument to their subtle, constant judgment. Then came the phone call from Aunt Brenda, my mother's sister. "Your mother's been unwell," she'd murmured, her voice tight with suppressed panic. "Her blood pressure, the doctors are worried. And your father, he's beside himself." I knew what that meant. Another emergency. Another plea for help, thinly veiled as concern for their health. It always started with health, then spiraled into finances, into their inability to manage the sprawling, dilapidated house they insisted on keeping, into their golden years being tarnished by my supposed lack of contribution. I drove the 2 hours to their house, the old Ford rattling like a dying man's last breath. The house itself seemed to sag under the weight of its own history, a monument to their refusal to adapt. The porch swing creaked, perpetually empty. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of old wood, dust, and my mother's floral potpourri. My mother lay on the couch, a damp cloth on her forehead, looking remarkably well for someone supposedly at death's door. My father hovered, wringing his hands. "Kaylee, thank heavens you're here," my father said, his voice raspy. "Your mother, she's been so stressed. The bills, everything. It's just too much. The doctor said I need to reduce my stress, Kaylee," my mother added, her eyes fluttering open. "But how can I when everything is this way?" She gestured vaguely at the air, encompassing their entire existence. I sat on the worn armchair, the springs groaning beneath me. "What exactly is this way, Mom?" "The mortgage, dear," my father interjected, his gaze fixed on a crack in the ceiling. "It's due. And the repairs on the roof, the estimate came in. It's astronomical. I knew this dance. I'd danced it 100 times since I turned 18. The subtle hints, the dramatic pronouncements, the implied guilt. This time, though, something shifted inside me. The book, How to Grow Up, flashed into my mind. I hadn't read it, not really. But the title alone had planted a seed. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice flat. My father exhaled slowly. "Well, the mortgage is $5,000. And the roof, they want half up front, so another $7,000. $12,000, Kaylee. We just don't have it. $12,000. My emergency fund, painstakingly built over years of working 2 jobs, would be decimated. Again, I'd saved for a down payment on my own small place, a place where I wouldn't feel like a permanent guest in my own life. My mother moaned softly. "Your father's pension, it's just not enough, Kaylee. We thought with your good job." "My good job pays me enough to barely survive in the city, Mom." I cut her off. "It doesn't make me an ATM." My father's head snapped towards me. "Is that what you think this is? We're your parents, Kaylee. We raised you. We sacrificed everything. Did you, Dad?" I leaned forward. "Or did you just expect me to take over where your sacrifices ended?" The room fell silent, thick with unspoken accusations. My mother's eyes, no longer fluttering, fixed on me, wide with surprise. They weren't used to me pushing back. I was usually the quiet, compliant one, the one who always came through. I stood up. "I'll transfer the money for the mortgage. $5,000. Consider it a loan. And I want a repayment plan." My father scoffed. "A repayment plan? From your parents?" "Yes, Dad. From your parents. Because that's what grown-ups do. They make plans. They take responsibility. And they don't rely on their children to bail them out every time they mismanage their finances." My mother sat bolt upright. "Kaylee, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm tired," I said, my voice rising, a tremor of something new and potent running through it. "I'm tired of being your financial safety net. I'm tired of putting my life on hold for your choices. You want me to grow up? Fine. I'm growing up. And part of that means setting boundaries." I left the $5,000 in their account. But I didn't leave the issue there. The next few weeks were a blur of research. I hadn't touched their book, but I started reading other books, articles, forums. Real advice on financial independence, on setting boundaries, on adulting. I learned about trusts, about wills, about power of attorney. I learned about financial abuse, about enmeshment. The more I learned, the clearer the picture became. My parents hadn't just given me a book. They'd unwittingly handed me a weapon. I called my brother, Mark, who lived in another state. They asked me for 12,000 mark. I gave them 5. He grunted. Figures. They asked me for 10 last month for medical bills. Said they couldn't pay for Mom's new treatment. I told them I was saving for a house. Did they guilt trip you? Oh, Mom. The disappointed sigh special. Dad went with the we're old, we won't be around forever routine. Mark, do you know how much debt they're actually in? He paused. No. They've always been cagey. Why? Because I think it's worse than we know. And I think they're banking on us, on me, to keep them afloat. Mark was skeptical, but he agreed to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our cities. We pored over the scraps of information we had, the vague amounts, the endless emergencies. It painted a grim picture. They weren't just struggling, they were drowning, and they were dragging us down with them. Armed with this new perspective, I found a financial advisor, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. She listened patiently as I laid out the tangled web of my parents' finances, or rather, my fragmented understanding of them. They need a full financial audit, Kaylee, Ms. Davies said, tapping a pen against her notepad. And a detailed budget. If they're unwilling to share information, it's going to be difficult. But it's crucial. You cannot keep bailing them out. It's enabling a cycle that will eventually break you. They won't agree to an audit, I said, knowing their stubborn pride. Then you need to protect yourself, she replied, her gaze firm. And perhaps for their own good, force their hand. That's when the idea solidified. The How to Grow Up book. It wasn't just about me growing up. It was about them growing up, too. I went back to their house, this time with a purpose colder and sharper than any resentment. My mother was back to her usual self, tending her roses, complaining about the aphids. My father was watching a golf tournament, the volume too loud. Mom, Dad. I began, my voice steady. We need to talk. About the house. And your finances. My mother straightened, her trowel still in her hand. Kaylee, we've been over this. It's fine. We're just having a rough patch. No, it's not fine, I countered, stepping into the living room, blocking the TV. It's never fine. Every few months, it's a new crisis. The mortgage, the roof, the car, the medical bills. You're bleeding money, and you're expecting Mark and me to be your blood bank. My father muted the TV. That's a harsh thing to say, Kaylee. We've always been there for you. And I've always been there for you, I shot back. But where does it end? Do I just keep working myself into the ground until I'm as broke and dependent as you are? My mother's face flushed. We are not dependent. You asked me for $12,000, Mom. You asked Mark for 10. You haven't paid me back for the last 2 loans. You are dependent, and it's not sustainable. I took a deep breath. I've spoken to a financial advisor. She says you need a full financial audit. You need to sell this house, downsize. You need to create a budget and stick to it. My father laughed, a short, bitter sound. Sell the house. This house has been in the family for 50 years. Your grandmother lived here. And it's crumbling around you, Dad. I exclaimed, my voice rising. It's a drain. It's a liability. It's why you're always broke. It's why you can't afford to live comfortably without constantly begging your children for money. How dare you? My mother's voice was a sharp crack. We gave you everything. And now I'm asking you to take responsibility for your own lives. I met her furious gaze. I'm not giving you another dime until you agree to a full financial review with Ms. Davies, and you commit to following her advice, including selling this house. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's jaw worked. My mother's eyes narrowed, a cold fury replacing the shock. You're blackmailing us, my mother finally whispered, her voice laced with venom. I'm setting a boundary, I corrected her, my voice low and firm. I'm growing up, just like you wanted me to. And part of that is recognizing when a relationship is toxic and unsustainable. You taught me that, Mom. With that book, I pointed to the bookshelf where the How to Grow Up book still sat, unread by them, but its spirit having taken root in me. Their eyes followed my finger, and a flicker of understanding of dawning horror crossed their faces. They had given me the tool, and I was using it to dismantle their carefully constructed world of dependence. The next few months were a war of attrition. They tried every trick in the book. The silent treatment, the tearful phone calls, the poor health episodes, the dramatic pronouncements of destitution. Mark, bless him, stood firm with me. We presented a united front. "Your sister is being ridiculous, Mark," my mother wailed over the phone one evening. "She's trying to throw us out of our home." "She's trying to help you, Mom," Mark replied, his voice calm. "You're in deep financial trouble. You know it. We know it. You need to face it." My father even called me, his voice rough with feigned authority. "Kaylee, you need to back down. This is disrespectful. We are your parents." "And I am your daughter, Dad," I said, my voice unwavering. "And I refuse to watch you drown yourselves and drag us down with you. This is the only way." They resisted, of course. For weeks, they refused to speak to Ms. Davies. They refused to even acknowledge the idea of selling the house. But the bills kept piling up. The mortgage payments they missed, the late fees, the mounting repair costs for the roof that was now actively leaking into the living room. The bank started sending threatening letters. Finally, a truly desperate call came from my father. His voice was no longer authoritative, but brittle, defeated. "Kaylee, the bank. They're threatening foreclosure. Have you called Ms. Davies?" I asked, my voice devoid of triumph, only a weary resolve. A long pause. "No." "Then call her, Dad. Tell her everything. Open your books. Let her help you." He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch, then hung up. The next day, Ms. Davies called me. "Your parents reached out." Reluctantly. "It's going to be a long process, Kaylee. They're in a lot deeper than even you realized. But they've finally agreed to start the audit. And they're open to discussing selling the house." Relief washed over me, cold and clean. It wasn't a victory dance, not really. It was more like the quiet satisfaction of a surgeon who'd just completed a difficult, necessary operation. It hurt, it was messy, but it was for their own good and mine. It took months. Ms. Davies was relentless. She uncovered decades of financial mismanagement, hidden debts, and a shocking lack of planning. My parents, stripped of their illusions and their excuses, were forced to confront the reality they had so carefully avoided. The house, their beloved, crumbling monument, was put on the market. It sold, eventually, for less than they hoped, but enough to clear most of their debts and buy a small, manageable condo. Moving day was quiet. No grand pronouncements, no dramatic tears. My mother packed her roses in small pots. My father carefully wrapped his golf trophies. They looked smaller, somehow, less imposing in the sparse, empty rooms of the house they were leaving. "You know, Kaylee," my mother said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years, as I helped her carry a box of old photo albums. "That book, How to Grow Up, I didn't think you'd ever read it." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. You gave me the title. I wrote the rest of the chapters myself. She didn't respond, just sighed, a different kind of sigh this time. Not one of weariness or disappointment, but perhaps of quiet understanding. They're in their new condo now. It's small, modern, and blessedly financially sustainable. They're learning to live within their means. They still complain, of course, about the lack of a garden, about the noisy neighbors, about the indignity of it all. But they haven't asked me for money. Not once. And I'm saving for my own down payment. My emergency fund is slowly rebuilding. My life is mine, unburdened by their choices. They wanted me to grow up. And I did. I grew up, and I learned how to cut the ties that were binding me, even if it meant cutting them loose too. I am not the asshole for standing up for my own future. I am simply grown.